Morning, everyone. Welcome to our state and federal program directors meeting. We want to thank you today for joining us. And I can't believe this is the last SFP meeting of 2023. Just crazy how time flies when you're having fun. Um, I'm Adrienne Balcazar, and I'd like to introduce the LCAP-State and Federal Programs Unit. Today joining us is Debbie, Helen, Augustine, Rachel, Jeannie, Anita, and Maribel. Before we get started, we would like to know, what are you looking forward to this winter break? You can take a look at the photos. We have tamale making, snow sports, reading a book or novel, working on a home project, binge watching, my favorite, and catching up on office work, family time, or other. Share in the chat what stands out to you, or what are you most looking forward to? And don't say mid-year update. Awesome. Yes, time with family. Sleep. The Khan app. I'm so sorry. I said. But at least you're looking forward to it. That's a good thing. Great. Okay. So on the next slide, we wanted to share that LACO has fully launched their new website. And I don't know if you use the old one, but nevertheless, we want to kind of walk you through this new website. It is different. And so we will always post in our chat the links directly to our work, but nevertheless, if you need to use the website, this will kind of give you a general overview. It's a quick, short video. And we also provided the YouTube link at the bottom of the slide for future reference, or if you want to share it to other people and with other people. So go ahead.
Hi, this video will demonstrate how to access LACO's LCAP and state and federal programs meetings and resources. This quick tutorial will help you navigate our new LACO website. First, to access LACO website, simply type laco.edu on your browser. Here we see our main page, and there are several ways to access LCAP and SFP unit. One way is to go to the search bar and type LCAP. And the links here will take you to the LCAP and state and federal programs. Click on the first link. And you can see now the LCAP and state and federal programs page has LCAP materials and support button, state and federal programs materials and support button, and state and federal programs publications button. Another way to get to this same page is from the main website. Hover over Programs. Once you hover over Programs, all LACO programs and units will be listed in alphabetical order. Go to LCAP and state and federal programs, and it will take you to the same website, LCAP and state and federal programs page. On the first button, LCAP and materials and support button, you click, it will give you access to the eLCAP online system, as well as LCAP development resources, which will take you to our Canvas page. As you can see, you'll be able to see LACO's developed resources, as well as CDE resources and other legal references. If you want to go back to the LCAP and state and federal programs main page, you can also click on the breadcrumbs up here and go back to the LCAP and state and federal programs page, and you'll also be able to access state and federal programs materials and support page. Click on the button, and it'll give you access to two buttons here. The first one is state and federal programs directors meeting resources, as well as state and federal programs workshop resources. Both of these buttons will take you to LACO's Canvas website. And if you go here, it'll give you all the monthly meetings that we've had this year with access to the presentations, recordings, and Q&A, as well as the agendas. And if you click on the state and federal programs workshop resources, it will take you to the workshops that we held this year so far. Again, like our SPSA, our School Site Council, and our Fiscal Basics Part 1 and 2, the presentations, the recordings, and the Q&A are also available. And on this page, we will also have our latest recording of our latest meeting that we had, which for us was most recent was October, as well as the agendas. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, or you can email us at sfp@laco.edu or lcap@laco.edu. Thank you for listening.
Great. So again, we have the link at the bottom of that slide for future reference. And again, if you want to share it with others who want to look at other units at LACO. Okay, so let's get started. We know to access today's presentation, we ask you to click on the link in the chat. It will take you to our Canvas page directly. The presentation can be accessed through the icon as shown here, and the agenda and resources are listed and available here as well. We are recording today's workshop, and we will be posting the link. Once we complete the Q&A, you can also find it here as well. So let's get started with today's meeting. Today we will talk about the CARs, some reminders. Many of our topics today are reminders for all the upcoming legal requirements or reports or changes. So we're going to talk about the CARs winter release. We're talking about the federal updates, specifically the quarterly reporting and ESSER 3, and we'll cap that off with the FPM. And then on the state side, we have the A through G completion improvement grant reporting that's coming up December 31st. We have the LCAP mid-year update that's coming up by February 28th. And then also the changes in the 24-25 LCAP template and instructions, which is, you know, we live it. And so the more you hear it, the more it makes sense. So again, you can't get enough of the understanding of the changes and hearing about it. So we look forward to sharing that with you. And then just a reminder of our next meeting is January 18th at 10 a.m. and that will be the new year. As usual, please place your questions in the chat box and we will answer any simple questions that we can in the chat. We will also follow up with written responses in a Q&A that will be emailed to you. We are also, again, recording today's meeting and we will post this on our Canvas webpage. This link here will take you to the previous Q&As as well as the slides and handouts from our previous meetings. And so now I will turn it over to Debbie to share some updates on the winter release of the CONAP.
Thank you, Adrienne. Good morning, everybody. Next slide. So we understand that many of you in our audience are seasoned SFP directors and are familiar with the basics of the CONAP. But we also know that there are some folks attending now that are new to this process. And for you, we wanted to present a few slides just to give you some foundational information to help ground you in this process. So we start with the simple question, what is the CONAP? The CONAP, or the Consolidated Application, is an annual process. It's a two-part application and reporting process for multiple state and federal formula-driven categorical program funds. It's submitted by the county offices, school districts, and direct funded charters. The CONAP is used by the CDE to distribute categorical funds from various federal programs to those county offices, school districts, and direct funded charters throughout California. There are two reporting periods called spring and winter release. Next slide. So how does the CONAP work? LEAs use a reporting system called the Consolidated Application Reporting System, or CARS for short. It's an electronic system that LEAs use to apply for funding, manage and report data, and provide assurances that the district will comply with the legal requirements related to the specific formulas driven by state and federal categorical programs. This system is also used by the CDE categorical program staff and fiscal services to collect financial and participation data to ensure the compliance to state and federal regulations and guidance in the use of the funds. So the CONAP information is maintained through the CDE's Consolidated Application Reporting System. And in order to access the CARS system, you need to have a username and a password. But in order to obtain that username and password, you first need to register with the CDE's PASS, or Centralized Authentication System. And then this system actually interfaces with multiple other CDE systems. So the link on the slide there is how you can register for CAS and for CARS. Next slide, please. So earlier I said there are two reporting periods, spring release and winter release. Spring release is typically mid-May to end of June. It's submitted via CARS. You're going to document your programs and the LEA's participation. So if you qualify for Title I or Title III, you do not have to accept the money. You accept that through this spring release. You say, yes, we're going to participate in this program. And yes, we will make sure that we comply with the legal requirements related to the expenditures of these funds. So we accept Title I funds. We agree to comply with the federal regulations that come with those funds. Spring release also requires board approval. So this is when you would have your board approve the funds that you're accepting and the assurances that you have provided. And your winter release, which is now, is typically December to January. It's submitted also via CARS and the LEA entitlements for each funded program. So we'll go over that later. Next slide, please. So things just to remember that's very important, that LEAs need to keep a printed signed version of the application for funding at their site and be prepared to show it when requested by state personnel. The LEAs should maintain 3 years of supporting records and documentation related to funding activities after the final year of those expenditures. And then the CONAP is submitted electronically, but all pages that contain original signatures must be maintained in the LEA's office. So with this just basic information, I want you to understand that this is more than a compliance document. One person should not be the keeper of this knowledge in your LEA. Program and fiscal both need to understand this process and how it works, and they need to work together to oversee the commitment to the use of the funds and to what you have assured the state that you would use the funds for. So this is not just a one and done. This is a process and really is the responsibility of more than just one person. Next slide, please. So now with the CARS winter release dates, these are the dates. The dates are issued every year. So the windows can change. Like last year, our winter release was not really in winter. So this year we are grateful. The system opened December 1st, and your due date, your release date, they call it, is January 15th of 2024. So you have this window. Now, the release and system dates, if you see on that timeline, release deadline, system close. So January 15th, February 15th. That window really is for the program offices to review and reach out to LEAs to make any corrections or to make any changes or any issues that they find. They will reach out to the LEAs for correction. your due date, your target date is right there, January 15th, in order to have all your information uploaded into the CAR system. Next slide, please. So for the 23-24 winter release forms, the forms that are included are 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24. Next slide. This is the 21-22 fiscal year. There have been very few changes to the typical reporting for these periods. So this is just a list, and these links here would take you to the detailed information for each of these. Same for the next slide. Same applies here for 22-23, and then very few changes. And then here for next slide, 23-24. Primary change here is that federal transferabilities have to be enter the data rather than it being pre-populated. So this is one change that you will have to enter the data rather than it had been pre-populated in prior years. Okay, so next slide. So these are the tentative dates. Then of course, we know CDE, it's subject to change, but these are the tentative dates that they have released for spring and then winter of 2024. So, and you can't hold us to that. So next slide. Review check. Which of the following is not part of the consolidated application? A, Title I, B, Title II, C, Title III, D, LCFF. Okay, go ahead and put it in the chat. Yep, you know. Okay, next slide. Good job, everybody. LCFF is not part of the consolidated application because we know that the LCAP is required for your LCFF funding. LCFF was actually enacted to eliminate many of the state categorical funds, in the spirit of giving LEAs flexibility to use their funds in a more coordinated and purposeful manner, and that's why we have our LCAP. Okay, so now to Augustine for federal updates.
Awesome. Good morning. Thank you, Debbie. Good morning and happy Thursday, everyone. Let's go ahead and dive into some quick federal updates. We'll start our federal updates with a look at some upcoming reporting deadlines. So the winter 2023 quarterly reporting window is open until January 12th, and this covers expenditures through December 31st, 2023. Any LEAs that reported obligations of CARISA Act funds in the last quarterly reporting period will be required to report liquidation of those obligations through December 31st. And LEAs will also be reporting on their ARP Act funds, including ESSER 3, ELO-G, and Homeless Children and Youth. Now, when we shift over to year 4 ESSER and GEAR annual reporting, well, this is tentatively planned for early 2024 as we're waiting on deadlines from the U.S. Department of Education. And this year 4 reporting is going to be applicable to activities from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. So, like many of us, I like to see my information on a graphic or on a table. So to summarize the information on the previous slide, we've included this timeline and it's for ESSER 3 reporting. Now, what we see going from left to right is the cycle name. We're going to use the winter 2023 cycle for the demonstration. We also have the reporting period. So we can see that for the winter cycle, LEAs will be reporting the expenditures that occurred or will occur between October 1st and December 31st of this year. So it's important for our program folks to work in conjunction with their fiscal colleagues to collect the data that they need to be able to report it between when the window opens, which for winter 2023 was yesterday, December 13th, and when the window closes, which will be January 12th, 2024. We've also included a link to the CDE webpage containing all the federal stimulus programs reporting tables for your reference. I want to rewind just a bit and take a look at the fall 2023 quarterly reporting. This is where ELAs reported expenditures of the ARP Act funds through September 30th of this year. So as a reminder, the obligation deadline for the ARP Act funds is September 30th, 2024. And overall, 56.7% of ARP Act funds available to LEAs through the ESSER 3 mandatory subgrants and the ELO-G have been expended as of September 30th. So with just under a year remaining for LEAs to obligate these funds, LEAs are encouraged to continue to strategically plan expenditures for the use of these funds. Now, we're going to jump into a quick check. We just talked about it. The American Rescue Plan, the ARP Act, obligation deadline is September 30th, 2024. True or false? Yeah, that's an easy one. And yes, of course, the obligation deadline for the ARP Act funds is less than a year away. So let's prioritize strategically on how to let's prioritize strategic planning those expenditures. And now I'll hand it off to Adrian for federal program monitoring.
Thank you, Augustine. Okay, before we get started to FPM, on the next slide, please. Just wanted to kind of finish off the ESSER 3 liquidation extension request. Wanted to mention that. And CDE has been fielding a lot of questions about extensions of the ESSER 3 funds. The U.S. Department of Ed has confirmed that they intend to release guidance for a liquidation extension application process for the ARP Act funds, including ESSER 3. But right now, as of now, this specific guidance has not been released. A few notes about the liquidation extension process. If you are thinking about it or you might need that extra help, if the extension request is approved, and again, only USDE can approve that, the liquidation period would be extended to 18 months beyond the obligation deadline. The approval will be given by the U.S. Department of Ed, as mentioned, and also all ARP Act funds must be obligated by September 30th, 2024, just like Augustine just mentioned, and there are no plans for this obligation date, a deadline to be extended. So all of your funds must be obligated by next September 30th, 2024. And so again, with the proper planning and the strategic focus on it, it's really important that you start thinking about how you're going to cost out the rest of your money for federal stimulus funds. And then lastly, in order to possibly be eligible for this extension, generally this is because projects are kind of delayed. And so make sure that if you are asking for this extension, that your projects must be properly obligated by September 30th, 2024. They must reflect the allowable use of funds, and they must have followed all the applicable state and federal procurement requirements, such as the bidding and all that. And the project must have experienced unique circumstances that resulted in a delay. And so again, this is just something that as you are looking to spend down all your funds, if this is something that applies to you, then you want to keep this on your radar. Okay, so now let's talk FPM, and specifically to kind of connect what Augustine said and what CDE is saying in terms of some cautions that they're noticing in the FPM federal stimulus monitoring. So the U.S. Department of Ed has provided guidance that indicates that if an LEA fails to expend the ESSER 3 funds, specifically Resource Code 3214 on the requirement of 20% of your ESSER 3 funds must be used to address the impact of lost instruction time. And that if this is not met, the 20% threshold is not met, then you will be out of compliance and you will have a finding for this. So CDE is asking and recommending that LEAs take a closer look at their ESSER 3 funds now and make sure they are going to be meeting this requirement. In the Federal Stimulus Monitoring Program, CA-10 specifically addresses the program requirements of the ESSER funds, and CA-11 focuses on the actual plan requirements. Here's the blast from the past. Here's the ESSER 3 plan template. It should look familiar to you, especially if it's a living document, and if you're making changes with the ESSER 3 funds. You remember you need to also update your ESSER 3 plan as well. Originally, in order to have the plan approved, 20% of the ESSER 3 funds had to be reserved to address the learning loss through the implementation of evidence-based interventions. Also, these interventions had to respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs, and had to address the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus on low-income students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. So again, if you're new to this position, we highly recommend you find it and you read it and you make sure that you have a conversation with your fiscal folks to ensure that the plan is still viable and in place. And if there have been changes on the fiscal side, this is the time to revise your ESSER 3 plan. And again, you have to meet with your educational partners in order to complete this. So again, just wanted to remind everyone about this. In the actual instrument for the federal stimulus monitoring, there's specific evidence that's being requested that will validate whether you are in compliance. So for CA 10 and 11, the learning loss evidence-based interventions and the ESSER 3 LEA expenditure plan, will you be able to provide this requested evidence? Is there communication between the program and fiscal departments when fiscal changes are made? And will your ESSER 3 plan need to be updated to reflect these changes? Will these changes, fiscal changes, still allow you to meet the legal requirement of 20% addressing learning loss through the implementation of evidence-based interventions? So this is something definitely to ensure that you have in place now, because if there are things you need to put in order, you still have time to meet with your educational partners. You still have time to meet with your fiscal folks to make sure that they're communicating with you when if they're perhaps moving funds and in the panic of trying to spend them down. You need to be, program people need to be part of this conversation. So it's important that we bring it up now, so you have time to deal with it and address it. And so now Rachel will go over the A through G completion improvement grant reporting.
Thank you, Adrienne, and good morning, everyone. So next in this section, we just wanted to provide a quick reminder regarding the A through G grant reporting that is due in just a few weeks. And so as you may remember, LEAs that received A through G completion improvement grant program funds were required to develop an A through G plan back in 2022. So specifically on or before April 1st, 2022. And additionally, LEAs were required to discuss the plan at a regularly scheduled board meeting and then adopt the plan at a subsequent regularly scheduled board meeting. And so in addition to that plan requirement, there are also reporting requirements in statute related to these funds, with the first report being due on or before December 31st, 2023. And so again, that's coming up in just a few weeks. So if your LEA received A through G completion improvement grant funds, this reporting will need to be completed. So for the first report, LEAs are required to report to the CDE how they are measuring the impact of the funds received, as well as the outcomes to date based on those measurements. And that's for each activity or action identified in their plan. And then additionally, the statute also specifies that LEAs must submit their governing board or body adopted plan to the CDE at the same time that this reporting is completed. And then lastly, the final report is due to the CDE on or before August 31st, 2026. And so for this report, LEAs must report final outcomes that measure the impact of the funds received. So with the December 31st deadline quickly approaching, we recently started getting questions from districts about the A through G reporting and how to submit it to the CDE. And so we also hadn't seen any information on this posted in terms of where to submit this reporting or any additional guidance. So we reached out to the CDE for guidance, and the information on this slide is based on the guidance provided by CDE. So first off, the A through G grant reporting, it must be submitted to the CDE via email, specifically to the email address that's listed on the bottom of this slide. And again, that's by December 31st. And so LEAs must include the A through G plan that was adopted by their governing board or body back in 2022 when they submit this information to CDE. And then the report must include the expenditures to date for each activity or action that's included in the adopted plan. Also, brief descriptions of how improvement is being measured for each action or activity included in the plan. And then finally, the outcomes to date of those activities or expenditures. And so there is no required template or format that LEAs have to use when reporting this information to CDE. However, the CDE shared a sample reporting template that LEAs may use as a guide when reporting on the A through G grant. And so here we see some screenshots of the sample template, and we've also included it with today's materials for your reference. So here, let's just take a closer look at the sample template shared by CDE. And so you can see that this sample includes a column to list each activity or action that's included in your board adopted plan. And then there's a column to list the expenditures to date, the specific measure of improvement, as well as the outcomes to date. And you can also see that they've included an example filled in for each of those columns. And then the last column for final outcomes, this would not be completed until 2026 when LEAs have to report those final outcomes. And so again, there's no required template or format that LEAs have to use. You just have to be sure that the report includes the expenditures to date, the measure of improvement, and the outcomes to date for each action or activity identified in your board adopted plan. And so that concludes this section. So now I will turn it over to Anita for the LCAP mid-year update.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. The mid-year update report is upon us, and in this next section, we will review the when, the what, and the how of it all. So as you may recall, back in July of 2023, Senate Bill 114 amended Ed Code for LEAs related to the LCAP. All LEAs, whether a school district, a charter school, or a county office of education, shall present a report, which we will refer to as the mid-year update report, on the annual update to the LCAP and the LCFF budget overview for parents on or before February 28th of each year at a regularly scheduled meeting of the board or the governing body as it relates to your LEA. According to the amended Ed Code, for each respective type of ELA, the report or the mid-year update to the board or governing body must include the following: all available mid-year outcome data related to metrics identified in the current year's local control and accountability plan, meaning the 23-24 LCAP. Also, all available mid-year expenditure data on all actions identified in the current year's LCAP, and all available implementation data on all actions identified in the current year's LCAP. And so you might be asking right about now, what does all available data mean for the LCAP mid-year update report? There are no specifics stated in statute, which means that this allows for some flexibility for LEAs. Now, at our November SFP directors meeting, you may recall that we provided some suggestions on how an LEA might report the 3 required data: outcome, expenditure, implementation, to its board or governing body. The idea of organizing the report in buckets is a popular one that we've seen shared. So imagine 3 buckets or categories for organizing your available outcome data for metrics in the current LCAP. The 3 categories that may describe your metric status in the current LCAP may be unknown, in progress, or known as depicted in each bucket on this slide. And since you will need to report on all metrics for each goal in this current LCAP, determining at mid-year where each of those metrics can be placed in this bucket may provide some ease and sanity when reporting. So for some metrics, the outcome data is not yet available. Your outcome is unknown at this time. And this can certainly be the case for metrics aligned to local indicators, not yet started, or for metrics where data has not yet been collected, such as self-reflection on implementation of state standards or parent and family engagement, for example. The gray bucket on this slide represents metrics where the outcomes are still in progress. And here we see some examples of metrics where the outcomes are still in progress, such as your attendance rates, chronic absenteeism rates, and local assessment results, which might include like benchmark assessments or diagnostic assessments. It's important to remember that when we consider data that's still in progress, what gets reported is just a snapshot in time of data that is available for certain metrics for this mid-year update report. The pink bucket on the far right of the slide reflects those metrics in the LCAP where the outcomes that will be included in this year's Year 3 outcome section of the 23-24 LCAP are already known. And this could include available data from the dashboard, CalPads, DataQuest, or local data systems. Now, some metrics with outcomes that are known at mid-year include, for example, the 23-24 Williams Act reports, such as the sufficiency report for access to standards aligned instructional materials, or the facilities inspection tool ratings. Other data that are known could be from the December dashboard that will be available tomorrow for specific metrics included in the LCAP, such as the 2023 English Learner Progress, the graduation rates, your CAS results for 22-23, etc. This known outcome data can be reported in the LEA's presentation. Keep in mind that the examples provided on each of these 3 buckets are not comprehensive, and they highlight just a few examples of metrics. And once again, LEAs will need to present an update on all the available mid-year outcome data related to all the metrics that have been identified in your 23-24 LCAP. So keeping to the idea of organizing mid-year data on expenditures and implementation for all actions in buckets, we see here that the buckets represents actions that have not yet started, are in progress, or have been completed. So let's take a look at the first red bucket, which represents actions that have not started. As an LEA is preparing to share an update on the implementation of their actions, they may consider reporting on actions they have not started yet and provide some context so the board or governing body may understand why these actions have not started yet. For example, some actions may not have been implemented yet due to staffing shortages or related vacancies, and additionally, some LEAs may have shifted priorities at the beginning of the school year based on their analysis of data as they reestablish training priorities or the sequence for specific reasons. Another example may address professional development that was planned but has been delayed to shortages for substitutes or put off for implementation in the spring. There are a variety of reasons that may have delayed the implementation of planned actions. The gray bucket represents actions that the LEA has in progress. And for these actions, LEAs can provide a point-in-time update that would explain what has started and is currently in place. And this may include, for example, some PD has started, but not all staff has had the opportunity to participate. Share what costs have been incurred thus far. And similarly, some staff may have been hired for a particular intervention program, and implementation is underway at multiple schools while recruitment is continuing to start the implementation at other schools. The pink bucket represents actions that are completed. For example, an action may be considered as completed since materials are in place and staffing and training for a specific program has been completed. Perhaps a parent training series has been completed at your school district or your LEA, or perhaps specific training sessions for a particular program have been fully implemented. Because this is a mid-year point-in-time update, an LEA will need to keep in mind that many actions may not be considered completed until the end of the school year, but definitely on track to be completed by May or June. And so your mind may already be planning for how to build the report and what it might look like. Rest assured that there is flexibility in how an LEA chooses to present the outcome data for all metrics, expenditures, and implementation of all actions in the current year's LCAP. As you can see here on this slide, there are a plethora of ways that the data can be shared and presented that is comprehensive yet understandable. And later in this section, Helen will provide some additional resources for you. But first, here are some few considerations when planning and preparing your mid-year update report this winter. You will be working in tandem with your LCAP team, in particular, program and fiscal personnel who will support each other in preparation and presentation of the mid-year update report. And so when reporting mid-year expenditures, consider aligning to first interim budget reporting, which would have been calculated by district fiscal services in November and reported to the board or governing body in December. Why would this be a good idea, you might wonder? Well, second interim will report expenditures through January 31st, and fiscal staff will likely not have time to complete calculations prior to board presentation deadlines. And there may not be capacity to ask fiscal staff for additional estimated actual expenditure calculations beyond the required interim reporting periods. And so your first interim report calculations may be the most up-to-date and practical for the mid-year update report. Okay, and so now we think it's a good time to check for understanding, and here's an opportunity for you, true or false. The LCAP mid-year update report only includes reporting on all available expenditure and implementation data on all actions in the current year's LCAP. Place your answer in the chat. Maybe there'll be prizes next time for all those who participate. Okay, next slide. And you are correct. The statement is false. The LCAP mid-year update report also requires that LEAs report on all available outcome data related to metrics in the current LCAP. And congratulations to all those who took a bold and vulnerable opportunity to answer in the chat. We appreciate you. And Helen will take it from here and share some additional resources. Helen?
Thank you, Anita. In the next few slides, we wanted to provide you with resources to support you with the mid-year update report. Here, you can click on the link on this slide for an example board presentation for optional use by LEAs to meet the mid-year reporting requirements. This example presentation was created by the Riverside County Office of Education Assessment, Accountability, and Continuous Improvement Unit as one way to meet the requirements of reporting to the governing board or the body of each LEA. Another option to organize the presentations also can be by LCAP goals, state priority, or implementation status. Other options for reporting actions, implementation, and expenditures are also listed in this slide. You can see that you can add columns for implementation status, expenditures to date, or any other additional comments. And please remember, as mentioned, there is no set template for this presentation, and the mid-year update is not adopted by the governing body or board, but rather it's an informational report. So LEAs can also consider adapting the annual update template for the mid-year report. Since many of you have already begun collecting data and collecting information for the annual update, such as some of the year 3 outcome as Anita mentioned, or you have begun analyzing goals and their implementation statuses and the action for the implementation statuses, this information can also serve to provide information for the mid-year report. And again, LEAs may adapt the annual update template to meet the mid-year reporting needs as long as they ensure compliance with the statutory requirements, as Anita previously highlighted. We're also including the sample board agenda item, credited to our Ventura County Office of Education, as a resource for you. The Word version of this document is also linked in this slide and also on our Canvas page. The next 2 slides are 2 resources to support your LEAs with the LCAP process. We have updated these 2 documents for use by both charters and for the school districts. First, here we see the LCAP timeline, and included in the timeline is the requirement for providing a mid-year report to the governing board or body by February 28th each year. This timeline is offered to assist LEAs in mapping out and following a process that is efficient, meaningful, and aligned to the real work of the LEAs. Putting a process in place can ensure that the LCAP is straightforward and comprehensible for your educational partners, and it reflects what is occurring across the districts while meeting all approval requirements. The timeline is presented in 3 phases or trimesters to assist your LEA to organize and operationalize the LCAP process over the course of the school year. The link to this document is included in this slide. The second document is the summary of legal requirements, which includes current legislative requirements that provides additional information to guide your LEA's work with the LCAP. This guide provides educational codes and Code of Federal Regulation information. Again included is the requirement for providing a mid-year report to the governing board or the body by February 28th of each year, and what that report shall include. And as mentioned, these 2 documents are currently available and are provided as resources on our Canvas site and are included in our slide. And finally, as we end this section, please remember that LEAs are not required to use any specific template. Examples provided today are for illustrative purposes only. The mid-year update is not adopted by the governing board or the body, but rather it's an informational report. The mid-year report update is not submitted to the county office and is not part of the LCAP submission at the end of the year. And compliance with this requirement will be through the annual fiscal audit. So, checking for understanding again, true or false, the mid-year report is not a part of the 24-25 LCAP submission to the County Office of Education. Place your answer in the chat. Thank you. Answers coming in. Great. Thank you. And you are correct. The answer is true. The mid-year report is not submitted to the county office and is not part of the LCAP submission at the end of the year. Thank you for your time. Happy holidays. And now I'll turn it over to Jeannie for LCAP updates.
Thanks, Helen, and good morning, everyone, and happy holidays. We'll take a look, first of all, at what occurred this November when the State Board of Education adopted revisions to the LCAP template to address new legislative requirements that applied to the new 3-year LCAP cycle. The current templates adopted for use when completing the 24-25 LCAP are listed on the slide, and these are also posted on the CDE website. These include the budget overview for parents, a template for the 23-24 annual update, the 24-25 LCAP template, which includes sections for the plan summary, engaging educational partners, goals and actions, and increased and improved services, and the action tables template that provide fiscal information for the 23-24 LCAP annual update and the 24-25 LCAP. All of these templates together will be submitted for the 24-25 LCAP. Our presentation today highlights some of the key changes in the newly adopted template. The CDE, as you may know, is continuing to provide webinars to address each of the template sections, and our office will be providing training in the new year addressing the new templates and requirements. Next slide, please. So we'll start here with the 2023-24 LCAP annual update template. Some key changes are in the goal analysis, where LEAs reflect on each of the current year's LCAP goals. The third prompt here requires LEAs to describe the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of specific actions in making progress toward the goal during the 3-year LCAP cycle. This requires LEAs to reflect on progress over the period of time of the prior 3-year LCAP cycle to determine effectiveness or ineffectiveness of all of their actions. And the instructions define that effectiveness means the degree to which the actions were successful in producing the desired result, and ineffectiveness means that actions did not produce any significant or desired result. It's important to also note that a key change is that beginning with the development of the 24-25 LCAP, the LEA must change actions that they have determined have not proven effective over the 3-year period. We'll look next at the last question in the goal analysis. While the last prompt in the goal analysis is still about changes the LEA is making to the goal, expected outcomes, metrics, or actions, it adds the requirement for the LEAs to identify actions that they have identified as ineffective, and for each of these actions to include a description of the reasons for ineffectiveness and how changes to the action will result in a new or strengthened approach. The template for the 23-24 LCAP annual update is a standalone template that closes out the current year LCAP cycle. This goal analysis provides an opportunity for LEAs to reflect on progress over 3 years to determine effectiveness and ineffectiveness of actions, which can inform the local needs assessment process and planning for the upcoming 3-year cycle. A new 3-year LCAP cycle provides an opportune time for LEAs to look back over the past 3 years at successes, challenges, and outcomes for students, staff, and families. This can inform decisions made locally about the use of resources to meet student and community needs that will support all students and reduce disparities in opportunities and outcomes for student groups. We'll shift now to the new template for 24-25 LCAP, which begins a new 3-year LCAP cycle. This slide highlights the plan summary section that provides a summary of the LCAP. In the general information section, among other information that the LEA provides, LEAs that have schools eligible for equity multiplier funding are identified in the general information section. The LCFF Equity Multiplier Funding Program is a new funding program beginning this year. These are funds that may be used only at eligible schools and are included in focus goals in the LCAP. Eligibility is based on schools' non-stability rate and the percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged students. Additionally, 2 reflection sections are included, and these connect to performance levels reported on the 2023 dashboard coming out tomorrow. The first addresses annual performance. In this section, LEAs must identify the lowest performance on the dashboard. This includes any school within the LEA that received the lowest performance level on one or more state indicators on the 2023 dashboard. And this is, in most cases, the red indicator. Any student group within the LEA that received the lowest performance level on one or more state indicators on the dashboard, and any student group within a school within the LEA that received the lowest performance level on one or more state indicators on the 2023 dashboard. A new reflection section also applies to LEAs that are eligible for differentiated assistance. And here, LEAs must identify the reasons the LEA is eligible for differentiated assistance and provide a summary of the work underway as part of receiving assistance. Right, we'll go now to the Engaging Educational Partners section. In this section, our slide indicates the new requirement that an LEA receiving equity multiplier funds must also consult with educational partners at schools generating these funds in the development of the LCAP, specifically in the development of the required focus goal for each applicable school. In this section, a new table format provides for identification of specific educational partners and summary of how they were engaged in the LCAP development process. This includes the new requirement that an LEA must consult with the educational partners at the schools generating equity multiplier funds. The second prompt requires a description of how feedback from required educational partners influence the development of any goals, metrics, actions, or budgeted expenditures in the LCAP. And again, this also requires a description of how consultation with partners at equity multiplier funded schools influenced the development of the LCAP. Moving on to key changes in the goals and actions section. Here we see this section includes some new fields that are noted on the slide. The type of goal is added, and LEAs are required to identify the type of goal as either a focus goal, a broad goal, or a maintenance of progress goal. And a section is also included where state priorities addressed by the goal are identified. Specific instructions for the goal descriptions and explanation for why the LEA developed the type of goal are included that are specific to each goal type. For LEAs that are including the required focus goals for equity multiplier school sites, these must address the following: student groups with the lowest performance level on one or more state indicators on the dashboard, and any underlying issues in credentialing, subject matter preparation, and retention of schools educators, if this is applicable. Additional specific information is included that addresses the requirements for these schools. Added to the measuring and reporting results section is a column to number each of the metrics, and a new column is added on the other side where the LEA calculates the current difference from the baseline and the yearly outcome. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see the annual goal analysis prompts have been moved up to follow the measuring and reporting results section. The language in the prompts and the related instructions has also been updated to address the effectiveness and ineffectiveness of specific actions in making progress toward the goal and changes These language updates are similar to what we reviewed in the goal analysis in the annual update. And so beginning with the 24-25 or beginning with the 25-26 LCAP, LEAs will complete the goal analysis in this section. Next slide, please. All right, we'll shift to key changes for the required metrics. These are additional requirements that are fairly straightforward. Here we see for LEA-wide actions that are contributing to increasing or improving services. For each of these actions in the LCAP that is identified as contributing toward the requirement to increase or improve services for foster youth, English learners, including long-term English learners, and low-income students, and being provided on an LEA-wide basis. The LEA must identify one or more metrics to monitor the effectiveness of the action and its budgeted expenditures. Another requirement included on the slide is for equity multiplier goals. For each of these goals, the LEA must identify the specific metrics for each identified student group at each specific school site as applicable to measure the progress toward the goal. And as applicable, the specific metrics used to measure progress in meeting the goal related to credentialing, subject matter preparation, or educator retention at each of the specific school sites. On the next slide, we look at on the next two slides, we look at some required changes to actions that are required in the LCAP moving forward. There are requirements that are new for LEAs to include specific actions in the LCAP. The requirement to include specific actions in the LCAP for English learners related to language acquisition programs and professional development programs has been expanded. The requirement now applies also specifically to long-term English learners when LEAs have 15 or more long-term English learners. This aligns to the Ed Code revision that identifies long-term English learners as a specific student group when there are 15 or more LTELs in an LEA. In the case an LEA has both 30 or more English learners and 15 or more long-term English learners, the LEA must include specific actions for both English learners and long-term English learners to address each of these components. Another new requirement is included for LEAs that are eligible for technical assistance, which is most commonly determined for LEAs as differentiated assistance. For these LEAs, they must include specific actions within the LEA, within the LCAP related to the implementation of work that is underway as part of technical assistance or differentiated assistance. You may remember from a few slides back that LEAs are also addressing the work underway in the plan summary section that provides reflection on technical assistance. Next slide, please. A third requirement for actions addresses red indicators on the 23 dashboard. You can see included on the slide the multiple red indicators for which specific actions are required to be included in the plan. LEAs must include one or more specific actions in the LCAP for red indicators for a school within the LEA, a student group within the LEA, and or a student group within any school within the LEA. Using the dashboard released tomorrow, LEAs will need to be sure to identify any red indicators and then determine underlying causes as they develop actions that respond to these lowest performing indicators identified on the dashboard. Right, we'll move to the increased and improved services section next and take a look at 2 slides here. Some key changes in this section are highlighted on the next 2 slides. The prompt and instructions have been revised in this section, and a table format is included for the description of contributing actions that are included in the plan. The section includes 2 new tables. The first table is where LEAs provide descriptions for contributing actions that they are providing either LEA-wide or school-wide. The related instructions require the descriptions in 3 columns. The column for identified needs requires explaining the needs, conditions, or circumstances of the unduplicated student group or groups identified through a needs assessment. The instructions indicate that a meaningful needs assessment includes, at minimum, analysis of applicable student achievement data and educational partner feedback. In the next column, LEAs explain how the action will address the unique need and why it is being provided LEA-wide or school-wide. And in the last column, the LEA identifies the metric or metrics being used to measure the progress and effectiveness of the action. Next slide highlights the table for limited actions. And here, the table format for description is for description about contributing actions that are solely or only provided to one or more intended unduplicated student group. The table and related instructions require the descriptions to first explain the unique needs of the unduplicated student group or groups identified through a needs assessment. In the next column, LEAs explain how the limited action will address the unique needs of the unduplicated group being served. And in the last column, LEAs identify the metric or the metrics being used to measure the progress and effectiveness of the action. So what I've shared with you today so far is just a highlight of the key changes. We're going to take some quick time to do some checking for understanding about these key changes. So here, our first question. LEAs complete the goal analysis for the current year LCAP using the 23-24 annual update template. This template is one of the required components that is included in the 24-25 LCAP. True or false? Nice. Okay. You got it. And clicking on the slide, we see the correct answer, and that is correct. The template is one of the required components that is included in the 24-25 LCAP. Checking for understanding. Let's take a look at this question about English learners. If the LEA has 30 or more English learners and 15 or more long-term English learners, the LEA must include specific actions to address the following. And you can see on the slide, language acquisition programs for ELs, professional development programs for LTELs, professional development programs for ELs, language acquisition programs for LTELs, or all of the above. bright group. I see all correct answers in the chat being E, all of the above. And the new requirement, including the 15 LTELs counting as a specific student group, requires that all of the above are included in actions in the LCAP. All right, moving to our question and answers. We know we have provided you with a lot of information today, and we look forward to continuing with you to work on all of the information that we have shared today. You may have some additional questions, and we'd like for you to take some time to include those in the chat. We will follow up with our Q&A as soon as possible. And on behalf of the team, I'd like to remind you that our next state and federal program directors meeting is Thursday, January 18th. We look forward to seeing you. And we also ask that you take time to complete the evaluation for today's meeting. We really do appreciate the feedback that you provide us, and we use it to inform our next professional development and training opportunities to support your work. And also on behalf of the team, thanks so much for joining us, and have a wonderful winter break.